My name doesn't matter much anymore. What matters is the silence that comes after years of noise, the kind that fills your home with arguments, slammed doors, and words you wish you could take back. My story isn't about revenge. It's about dignity, self-respect, and what happens when you've given everything to someone who has forgotten what you're worth. A few months ago, my son looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're useless." It wasn't the first cruel thing he'd said to me, but it was the last straw. I remember the way his voice didn't shake, not even a little. He said it with certainty, like it was a fact carved into stone, and in that moment I realized something painful. He wasn't entirely wrong, not because I truly was useless, but because I had allowed myself to become that way in his world. You see, I'm a man in my late 40s. I grew up believing that love and loyalty could hold a family together, that a roof over your head and a warm meal meant something sacred. I built this home with my own hands, every nail, every wall, every patch of grass in that backyard. I stayed when his mother left. I stayed when money got tight. I stayed when the silence in our house grew heavier than words. But sometimes staying becomes a form of surrender. Let me take you back to the beginning, to when this house was more than walls and a roof, when it was a dream sketched on graph paper at our tiny kitchen table. I was 23 when I met Sarah. She was waitressing at a diner off Route 9, the kind of place where the coffee tastes like it's been sitting since morning and the pie is always homemade, even though everyone knows it comes from a distributor in Newark. She had this laugh. God, that laugh, it was like wind chimes on a summer porch, musical and unexpected. We married young, too young, some said. Her father didn't approve of me. I was a carpenter's apprentice with calloused hands and sawdust permanently embedded under my fingernails. He wanted her to marry a lawyer, or at least someone who wore a tie to work, but Sarah saw something in me that her father couldn't, or maybe she just saw an escape from her own suffocating small town life. Either way, we were in love, or what we thought was love at 23, which is really just hope dressed up in physical attraction and late night promises. When we found out she was pregnant, I was terrified. We were living in a cramped apartment above a laundromat, and the sound of washing machines rumbled through our floors like distant thunder, day and night. The walls were thin enough that we could hear our neighbors arguing in 3 different languages. It was no place to raise a child, so I made a promise. I told Sarah, I'm going to build us a house, a real home, something that's ours. She smiled, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. She'd heard promises before, from her father, from ex-boyfriends, from a world that had taught her not to trust words without weight behind them, but I meant it. I worked double shifts for 2 years. I framed houses during the day and did renovation work at night. I learned plumbing from a Croatian immigrant named Mako who chain smoked and told stories about surviving a war I'd only seen on television. I learned electrical work from a retired union man named Pete who had hands like baseball mitts and a patience that I envied. Every paycheck, I put aside what I could. Some weeks it was $100, some weeks it was $20. Sarah kept the money in an old coffee tin hidden in the back of our closet behind her winter coats. We called it the Dream Fund, and we'd count it together on Sunday mornings while our son, then just a toddler, played with wooden blocks on the floor. His name is Daniel. Danny, we called him then. He had his mother's eyes, hazel, flecked with gold, and my stubborn chin. He was the kind of kid who laughed easily and cried hard, who collected rocks from the parking lot like they were treasures, and insisted on wearing his superhero cape to the grocery store. He made everything feel possible. By the time he was 4, I'd saved enough for a down payment on a small plot of land about 20 miles outside the city. It wasn't much, just under an acre, mostly overgrown with wild grass and blackberry bushes, but it was ours. I'll never forget the day I showed it to Sarah and Danny. It was early autumn, and the leaves were just beginning to turn. The air smelled like wood smoke and distant rain. Danny ran through the tall grass, his arms spread wide like he was flying, and Sarah stood beside me, her hand in mine, and for the first time in years, I saw hope replace doubt in her eyes. This is it, I said. This is where we'll build our life. She squeezed my hand. I believe you. Those 3 words meant more to me than any paycheck ever could. Construction began that winter. I did most of the work myself, with help from Marco and Pete on weekends. We poured the foundation in January, when the ground was frozen solid, and our breath came out in white clouds. I remember thinking, as I smoothed the concrete, that I was literally laying the groundwork for my family's future. Every beam I raised with purpose. Every wall I framed with love. Sarah would visit the site after work, bringing thermoses of coffee and sandwiches wrapped in foil. Danny would help by handing me nails one at a time, his little face serious with concentration. "You're my best helper, buddy," I'd tell him, and he'd beam with pride. "I'm building our house, Daddy." "That's right, we're building it together." In those moments, I felt like I had everything a man could want. I had a purpose, I had a family, I had dirt under my nails, and a future taking shape in lumber and drywall. The house took 18 months to complete. 18 months of early mornings and late nights, of splinters and sore muscles, of problem solving and improvisation. I learned that building a house is like solving 1,000 small puzzles simultaneously. How to route plumbing around load bearing beams, how to calculate the pitch of a roof so snow won't accumulate, how to wire a three-way switch so you can control the same light from different rooms. But more than that, I learned patience. I learned that some things can't be rushed, that quality takes time, that shortcuts always reveal themselves eventually. By the time we moved in, Danny was 6. Sarah cried when she walked through the front door for the first time as a homeowner. She ran her hands along the walls I'd textured and painted, and whispered, "You did it. You really did it." I carried her over the threshold, even though we'd been married for years, and Danny followed behind us, shouting, "This is our house. We don't have to share walls anymore." That first night, we slept on a mattress on the floor because our bedroom furniture hadn't been delivered yet. We lay there in the darkness, the three of us, listening to the unfamiliar creaks and settling sounds of a new house finding its bones. "What's that noise?" Danny whispered. "That's just the house getting comfortable." I told him, "It's settling into place. Every house does it. Is it happy?" I looked over at Sarah, whose head was resting on my chest, and then down at my son, who was curled up between us. "Yeah, buddy, I think it's very happy." The problems started small. So small that at first I didn't recognize them as problems at all. Sarah began working longer hours at the hospital, where she'd gotten a job as a medical records clerk. It was good work, steady, with benefits. We needed the income building. The house had drained our savings, and we still had a mortgage to pay, but longer hours meant she was home less, and when she was home, she was tired. The laughter that had first drawn me to her became rarer, replaced by sighs and complaints about her boss, about the commute, about the bills that kept piling up despite both of us working full-time. I tried to compensate. I'd have dinner ready when she got home. I'd help Danny with his homework. I'd handle the laundry, the dishes, the yard work. I thought if I could just take enough off her plate, she'd find her way back to being the woman I'd married. But you can't fix a person the way you fix a house. There's no blueprint for healing a heart that's starting to wander. The first time I suspected something was wrong, really wrong, was on a Tuesday evening in March. Danny was 8. Sarah came home at 11 p.m., 3 hours later than her shift should have ended. Her hair was different, styled when she usually wore it in a practical bun. She was wearing perfume. "Sorry I'm late," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "We had an emergency with the filing system. Had to stay and fix it." I wanted to believe her, so I did. The second time, she said she'd gone out for drinks with co-workers. The third time, she didn't offer an explanation at all. She just brushed past me, went straight to the shower, and locked the bathroom door. I lay in bed that night, listening to the water run, and felt something cold settle in my chest. It was the same feeling you get when you discover rot in a load-bearing beam, the sudden knowledge that something you thought was solid is actually hollow. I didn't confront her. Part of it was cowardice. Part of it was denial, but mostly it was because of Danny. He was in 3rd grade, excelling in school, playing Little League. His life was stable, happy. I told myself that keeping our family together was more important than demanding truth. So I swallowed my suspicions and doubled down on being a good father. I coached Danny's baseball team. I built him a treehouse in the backyard, complete with a rope ladder and a pulley system for hauling up supplies. I taught him how to use a hammer, how to measure twice and cut once, how to respect tools and the craft of building. "Someday, you'll build things too," I told him, "and you'll remember that I taught you." He grinned. "We'll build things together, Dad. We'll have a business, you and me." Those words kept me going through the dark months that followed. Sarah left on a Sunday morning in October. I remember because Danny had a baseball game that afternoon, and she'd promised to come. Instead, I woke up to find a note on the kitchen counter, written in her neat, slanting handwriting. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. I'll call about Danny when I get settled. Please don't try to find me." That was it. No explanation, no forwarding address, no goodbye to her son. I stood in the kitchen, my kitchen, in the house I'd built, and felt the foundation of my life crack beneath me. Danny took it hard. Harder than I'd anticipated, though in retrospect, I don't know what I expected. How is an 8-year-old supposed to process abandonment? At first, he asked questions constantly. "Where's Mom? When is she coming back? Did I do something wrong? Is she mad at me?" I gave him the best answers I could, which is to say, I gave him partial truths cushioned by hope. "Mom needed some time away. No, you didn't do anything wrong. She loves you very much. I'm sure she'll call soon." But days Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, and the calls never came. Eventually, Danny stopped asking. Instead, he grew quiet. The boy who had once chattered endlessly about dinosaurs and rocket ships and what he wanted to be when he grew up began speaking in monosyllables. His grades slipped. His teacher called to express concern. He quit baseball mid-season without explanation. I tried everything. I took him to a child psychologist, a kind woman named Dr. Morrison, who had an office filled with toys and books about feelings. Danny sat on her couch, arms crossed, and refused to speak. After 3 sessions, she gently suggested that perhaps he wasn't ready yet, that some children process trauma in silence. Just be present, she told me. That's the most important thing. Let him know you're not going anywhere. So I was present. I made his breakfast every morning, pancakes on weekends, cereal during the week. I packed his lunches with notes that said things like, "Have a great day," and "You're awesome." Even though I suspected he threw them away without reading them, I attended every parent-teacher conference, every school concert, every event where other kids had both parents and Danny only had me. I was there. Always there, but being there wasn't enough. As Danny moved from elementary school to middle school, the silence between us deepened. Adolescence hit him like a storm, transforming my sweet, curious boy into a stranger with headphones permanently attached to his ears and a door that was always closed. I'd knock. "Danny, want to help me in the garage? I'm rebuilding the engine on the old Chevy." "Busy. How about we grab pizza? Your choice of place." "Not hungry. Can we talk? Just for a few minutes." Silence. I told myself it was normal teenager behavior. All kids pull away from their parents at that age, right? They're trying to establish independence, to figure out who they are separate from their family. I read parenting books. I joined online forums for single fathers. Everyone said the same thing. Be patient, be consistent, keep showing up. So I kept showing up, but patience is exhausting when it's never rewarded. Consistency feels like insanity when nothing ever changes, and showing up becomes soul-crushing when you're invisible. By the time Danny was 15, I realized I'd become a ghost in my own home. I existed to pay bills, to provide transportation, to sign permission slips. Beyond that, I was irrelevant. He had friends I'd never met. He had a girlfriend whose name I learned only because I accidentally saw a text on his phone. He had a whole life that didn't include me, that actively excluded me. And the worst part, I'd allowed it. I'd been so focused on not being the kind of father who smothers or controls or demands obedience that I'd become the kind of father who barely exists at all. The breaking point came gradually, like water finding its way through a concrete crack during winter, freezing and expanding until the whole structure splits. It started with small disrespects. He'd ignore me when I spoke. He'd roll his eyes when I asked about his day. He'd leave his dishes in his room until they grew mold, despite my repeated requests to bring them to the kitchen. Then came the bigger things. He took the car without asking and returned it with an empty gas tank. He threw a party while I was visiting my mother in the hospital, and I came home to find beer bottles scattered across the lawn and a hole punched in the living room wall. "What the hell happened here?" I demanded. He shrugged. "Some guys got rough. I'll fix it." "You'll fix it. Danny, this is our home. You can't just, your home." He corrected. "You're the one who's obsessed with it. I didn't ask you to build this place." The words hit me like a physical blow. "I built this house for you, for our family." "Well, newsflash, Dad, there is no family. It's just you and me, stuck in this place in the middle of nowhere." "We're not stuck. This is our home. I raised you here. Everything I've done has been for you." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's the problem. You gave up everything for me, and now you expect me to be grateful. But I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask for you to martyr yourself." I stood there, speechless, as he brushed past me and went to his room, slamming the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall and shattered. I never fixed that hole in the wall. I left it there as a reminder, though I wasn't sure what it was supposed to remind me of. His anger, my failure, the futility of trying to hold together something that had already broken. The confrontations became more frequent. He'd come home past curfew, and I'd be waiting up, worried sick. "Where were you?" "Out." "Out where?" "I called you 6 times. My phone died." "Danny, I need you to communicate with me. I can't just." "You can't what?" "Trust me. That's your problem, Dad. You think I'm going to screw up like Mom did. That's not fair, isn't it? You're always watching me, always waiting for me to disappoint you." "I'm not waiting for you to disappoint me. I'm trying to keep you safe." "I don't need you to keep me safe. I'm not a kid anymore." "Then stop acting like one. Take some responsibility. Show me some respect." And that's when he'd shut down completely. His face would go blank, his eyes cold, and he'd simply turn and walk away, leaving me standing there, my words echoing in the empty space between between us. I didn't know how to reach him anymore. I felt like I was shouting across a canyon that grew wider every day. The night he called me useless, I'd been working in the garage. The old Chevy I'd been restoring, the same one I'd invited Danny to help with countless times, was finally running after months of work. It was a small victory, but in a life that had felt increasingly like a series of losses, I clung to it. I was covered in grease, my back aching from being bent over the engine block when Danny came home. It was after midnight. He had school the next day, a test in AP English that he'd mentioned exactly once, weeks ago, before apparently forgetting about it entirely. I heard his car pull into the driveway, the car I'd bought for him, that I paid insurance on, that he treated like it was a God-given right rather than a privilege. Music was blasting from the speakers, something with heavy bass that rattled the garage walls. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked out to meet him. He was slouched in the driver's seat, scrolling through his phone, making no move to turn off the engine or get out. I tapped on the window. He looked up, annoyed, and rolled it down a few inches. "Turn off the car and come inside. We need to talk." "It's late, Dad. I'm tired." "It's late because you're just getting home. It's a school night. You have that test tomorrow." He rolled his eyes. "I've got it covered." "Do you? Because your last report card suggested otherwise." God, here we go. The disappointed father routine. "I'm not disappointed. I'm concerned. Your grades have been slipping. You're barely maintaining a B average, and you were talking about applying to—" "I know what I was talking about," he interrupted. "Plans change." "What does that mean?" He finally turned off the car and got out, slamming the door. "It means college isn't for everyone, Dad. Not everyone needs to follow the same path." "I never said there was only one path, but you have potential, Danny. You're smart. You could do anything you want, but you're throwing it away." "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm just figuring things out. By staying out until midnight on school nights. By blowing off your responsibilities." "My responsibilities?" His voice rose. "What about yours? Did you ever stop to think that maybe I don't want to be here? That maybe I'm sick of living in this house in the middle of nowhere, with you hovering over me, trying to relive your youth through my success?" "That's not what I'm doing, isn't it? You built this house. You sacrificed everything. You stayed when Mom left. You're the hero of your own story, Dad, but in mine you're just there. There, always watching, always reminding me of everything you've given up." I felt something sharp lodge in my chest. "I gave up things because that's what fathers do. That's what love is." "No," he said, his voice suddenly quiet, almost sad. "That's what obligation is. You stayed because you thought you had to. You built this house because you needed to prove something. But don't pretend it was all for me. Everything I've done has been for you." "Then maybe that's the problem." We stood there in the driveway, the motion sensor light casting harsh shadows across both our faces. I wanted to grab him, to shake some sense into him, to make him understand that I wasn't the villain in this story, but I also wanted to hold him the way I had when he was small, when he believed I could fix anything. Instead, I said, "I need you to start taking things seriously. Your education, your future, this family, this family." He laughed bitterly. "Dad, there is no family. It's just you and me, existing in the same space. That's not a family. Then what do you want from me? What would make you happy?" He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in his eyes, something that might have been pain or regret or just exhaustion. "I want you to stop trying so hard," he said finally. "I want you to live your own life instead of living through me. I want you to admit that maybe, just maybe, you resent me for what you gave up." "I don't resent you. You should," he said, "because looking at you tired, alone, still clinging to this house like it means something. I just see someone who sacrificed everything and got nothing in return." He moved toward the house, and I reached out, grabbing his arm. "Wait, let's talk about this. Let's figure it out." He pulled away. "There's nothing to figure out. You want to know the truth, the honest truth." I nodded, even though part of me wanted to walk away, to preserve whatever illusion of peace still existed between us. "You're useless, Dad." The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. "You're useless. You built this house, but you couldn't keep Mom. You work all the time, but we're still broke. You try to give me advice, but you never went anywhere, never did anything except this." He gestured at the house behind us. "This is your grand achievement. A house in the middle of nowhere. Great. Congratulations." I felt my knees weaken. "I worked my entire life to give you stability, to give you opportunities I never had, and I'm supposed to be grateful. For what? For growing up with a father who's always tired, always stressed, always sacrificing. You think that was a gift, that was a burden. Every day I see what you gave up, and every day I know that I'm supposed to make it worthwhile. But I can't. I'm never going to be enough to justify what you lost. You don't have to justify anything. You just have to be my son. son. I don't even know what that means anymore. He turned and walked into the house, leaving me standing there in the driveway, the word useless echoing in my mind like a curse. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Sarah and I had once sketched our dreams, and I looked around at the house I'd built. Every corner held a memory. The notch in the door frame where I'd marked Danny's height every birthday. The scuff marks on the wall from when he'd learned to ride his bike indoors on a rainy day. The window I'd replaced after he'd accidentally thrown a baseball through it when he was 10. This house was a museum of my life, but museums are for dead things, things that used to matter but no longer breathe. Hash and I realized, sitting there as dawn broke through the kitchen window, that I had been dead for a long time. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. I had stopped living for myself years ago, maybe decades. I had poured all my energy, all my love, all my hope into this structure, both the physical house and the metaphorical family, and now it was crumbling anyway. Danny was right about one thing. I had resented him, not constantly, not consciously, but in small moments when I was too tired to think, when the weight of single parenthood felt crushing, when I saw other men my age traveling or pursuing hobbies, or simply existing without the constant anxiety of trying to be enough for someone who didn't want what I was offering. But more than that, I resented myself. I resented the man I'd become. Small, silent, suffocated by obligation and duty. I had built this house with my hands, but somewhere in the process I had dismantled myself. The decision came quietly, without drama or revelation. It was simply there when I woke up, as if it had been waiting for me all along. I would sell the house, not out of anger, not to punish Danny, but because staying was killing me, and I couldn't save him by destroying myself. I called a real estate agent the next morning. Her name was Patricia, a woman in her 50s with efficient energy and a no-nonsense attitude. "This is a beautiful property," she said, walking through the rooms with an appraising eye. "You built this yourself?" "Yes, that's rare these days." "It's got character. That'll help with the sale." Character. I almost laughed. What she saw as character, I saw as scars. Every imperfection told a story. The slightly uneven floorboard in the hallway where I'd miscalculated the joist spacing, the patch in the ceiling from when a pipe had burst, the spot in the living room where Danny's handprint was still visible in the paint because I hadn't had the heart to cover it up after he'd helped me at age 5. "How soon can you list it?" I asked. "I'll have the paperwork ready by Friday." "Market's good right now. I'd estimate you'll have offers within 2 weeks, maybe less." "Good." She looked at me curiously. "Are you downsizing? Kids off to college?" "Something like that." I didn't tell Danny, not at first. I let him continue his routine, waking up late, grabbing breakfast on his way out, coming home at odd hours, treating the house like a hotel where he happened to have a permanent reservation. I watched him differently during those 2 weeks. I looked for signs that he cared, that he'd noticed something was different. But he was absorbed in his own world, his phone always in his hand, earbuds always in place, a wall of technology separating him from reality. The offers came quickly, just as Patricia had predicted. The house had good bones. Of course it did. I'd built it. And the location was desirable for people wanting to escape the city without being too remote. I accepted an offer $3,000 above asking price. The buyers were a young couple with a baby on the way. They walked through the house with stars in their eyes, talking about which room would be the nursery, where they'd put their furniture, how they'd landscape the backyard. They reminded me of Sarah and me 20 years ago, full of hope and plans and the naive belief that building a structure could guarantee happiness. I wanted to warn them. I wanted to say, a house is just wood and nails. It won't keep the people you love from leaving. It won't prevent your children from resenting you. It won't fill the silence when everyone has gone. But I didn't. I just signed the papers. I told Danny 3 days before the closing. He was in his room, as usual, doing whatever teenagers do behind closed doors. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. "What?" The irritation in his voice was palpable. "I need to talk to you. It's important." A long sigh, then footsteps. The door opened a crack. "What, can I come in?" Another sigh. He opened the door wider and retreated to his bed, where his phone was waiting. I looked around his room. Posters of bands I didn't recognize, clothes scattered across the floor, an air thick with the smell of adolescence and neglect. "I've sold the house," I said. He didn't look up from his phone. "Ha ha. I'm serious, Danny. I sold it. We close on Friday. The new owners take possession next Monday." Now he looked up. "You're joking." "I'm not." His face went through several expressions. Disbelief, confusion, then anger. "You can't sell the house. This is my home." "No," I said quietly. "It was ours, until you made it clear that you don't see it that way." He stood up. "What are you talking about? Where are we supposed to go?" "I'm moving out. I've rented a small place for myself. As for you," I pulled an envelope from my pocket and set it on his desk. "That's $3,000. First month's rent and security deposit for wherever you decide to land." He stared at the envelope like it it was a live snake. You're kicking me out. You turned 18 2 months ago. Legally, you're an adult. You've made it very clear that you don't need me, that I'm useless, that this house is a burden. So I'm releasing you from that burden. Dad, I didn't mean. Yes, you did. And you know what? You were right. I have been useless. Not because I don't work hard or don't love you, but because I've been trying to be something you don't want. I've been trying to force a relationship that you've made clear you're not interested in. That's not. You can't just sell the house. I already did. But this is where I grew up. All my memories are here. I felt something bitter rise in my throat. Your memories? You mean the same house you called the middle of nowhere? The house you couldn't wait to escape. Those memories. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. I need you to start packing. I said, you can take whatever you want. Furniture, belongings, whatever fits in your car. The rest will either go to storage or get sold. Where am I supposed to go? You have friends, don't you? You've been spending all your time with them anyway. I'm sure one of their families would let you stay for a while. Or you can use that money to rent a room somewhere. This is insane. You can't just decide this without talking to me. I did talk to you multiple times. You just weren't listening. You haven't been listening for years because you're always nagging, always on my case about school and curfew and about being your father. I interrupted. Yes, that's my job. Or it was, until you made it clear that job was no longer wanted or needed. Tears appeared in his eyes, the first tears I'd seen from him in years. I didn't mean it, that stuff I said about you being useless. I was just angry, I know, and I forgive you for saying it, but you saying it made me realize you were telling the truth, not about me being useless, but about the situation. I've become useless because I've been trying to force a connection that isn't there. I've been living for you instead of with you, and in the process, I've forgotten how to live for myself. So this is about you. You're abandoning me like Mom did. The comparison stung, but I didn't flinch. Your mother left without warning, without explanation, without looking back. I'm giving you warning. I'm explaining, and I'm not leaving you. I'm releasing you. There's a difference. I don't understand the difference. You will. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but someday, when you're responsible for someone else, when you've given everything, and it still isn't enough, you'll understand. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. Please don't do this. It was barely a whisper. I'll do better. I'll listen more. I'll respect the house. Danny, this isn't about punishment. This isn't about you doing better. This is about me finally admitting that I can't keep living this way. I can't keep measuring my worth by whether you love me back. I can't keep building my life around someone who doesn't want to be the center of it. I do want. No, you don't. And that's okay. You're 18. You're supposed to be pulling away, building your own life. But I can't watch it happen from the sidelines anymore. I need to build my own life too. I left his room before either of us could say anything else. The last week in that house felt surreal. Danny moved through it like a ghost, not quite believing it was real until the moving truck arrived. He'd found a place with 2 friends from school, a basement apartment in town. I helped him move his stuff, carrying boxes down narrow stairs, while his friends avoided making eye contact with me. Thanks, Mr. Morrison, one of them mumbled. I just nodded. When Danny's car was packed and he had no reason left to stay, we stood in the driveway, the same place we'd stood when he'd called me useless. I guess this is it, he said. I guess so. When will I see you again? I don't know. When you want to, I suppose. You have my number. He looked at the house behind me, and for the first time, I saw him really look at it, not as a prison or a burden, but as something that had held his childhood. I'm sorry, he said, for what I said, for how I've been. I know. Do you forgive me? I thought about it. Forgiveness is complicated. It's not a switch you flip. It's a process, a choice you make over and over. I'm working on it, I said honestly. But Danny, you need to understand, forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. It means we acknowledge what happened and try to move forward. Can we move forward together? Maybe, but not right now. Right now, we both need space. You need to figure out who you are without me hovering, and I need to figure out who I am beyond being your father. His eyes filled with tears again. I'm scared. Me too, I admit it, but being scared means you're alive. It means you're still capable of feeling. That's more than I've done in years. He moved toward me, hesitant, and I pulled him into a hug. He felt both bigger and smaller than I remembered, broader in the shoulders, but somehow fragile, like he was still the little boy who'd needed me to check under his bed for monsters. I love you, I said into his hair. I love you too, Dad. We stood there for a moment, and then he pulled away, wiping his eyes. I should go. My friends are waiting. Be safe. Call if you need anything. I will. He got in his car, and I watched him drive away, his brake lights disappearing around the corner. Then I was alone. I moved to a small cabin about 40 miles away. It was nothing like the house I'd built, just a simple one-bedroom structure on the edge of a lake, surrounded by pine trees and silence. No neighbors close enough to hear, no memories embedded in the walls, no ghosts of family dinners or Christmas mornings or birthday parties, just space, quiet, room to breathe. The first few nights were brutal. I'd wake up in the darkness, disoriented, reaching for a light switch that wasn't where I expected it to be. I'd make breakfast and automatically reach for an extra plate before remembering I was cooking for one. The silence was deafening. For years, I'd been surrounded by noise. Danny's music, the television, the sound of doors opening and closing. Even during our worst silences, there had been presence, the knowledge that someone else was breathing the same air. Now there was nothing, just me and the echo of my own thoughts. I won't lie, I fell apart for a while. I cried more than I had in decades. I raged at the unfairness of it all, at Sarah for leaving, at Danny for resenting me, at myself for letting it get this bad. But slowly, painfully, I started to rebuild. Not a house this time, myself. I established routines, morning coffee on the deck, watching the sun rise over the lake, afternoon walks in the woods, learning the names of trees and birds I'd never paid attention to before, evening reading, books I'd bought years ago but never had time for. I taught myself to cook, really cook, not just throw together meals for efficiency. I made bread from scratch, learning how to proof yeast and knead dough. I experimented with spices and recipes, eating meals that were just for me, not approved by anyone else's preferences. I fixed things around the cabin not because they needed to be fixed, but because I enjoyed the process. I built a bookshelf, I renovated the deck, I installed a new window that gave me a better view of the lake. But this time, I wasn't building to prove something. I was building because I could, because I wanted to, because the act of creation brought me peace. 3 months passed before Danny called. I was sitting on the deck, watching a storm roll across the lake when my phone rang. His name lit up the screen and I hesitated before answering. "Hello, Dad, it's me. I know, how are you?" There was a long pause. "Can we talk? In person? Of course. When? Are you free tomorrow? I could drive out." I gave him directions and spent the rest of the evening preparing, nervous in a way I hadn't been in months. I cleaned the cabin, made sure I had food he'd like, rehearsed things I might say. By the time he arrived the next afternoon, I was exhausted from anxiety. He looked different, thinner, more tired. The arrogance that had defined his late teenage years seemed diminished, replaced by something more uncertain. "This is nice," he said, looking around the cabin. "Simple. That's the idea." We sat on the deck with coffee, and for a while neither of us spoke. Then Danny said, "I got a job at a restaurant downtown. It's just washing dishes, but it's something. That's good. The manager says if I stick with it, I can train to be a line cook. It doesn't pay much, but I like it. The work is honest. Does that make sense?" "It does." He looked at the lake. "Living on my own is hard, harder than I thought. Rent, groceries, utilities. It all adds up so fast, and I'm always tired. I work nights, try to do online classes during the day, and there's never enough time for anything." I waited, sensing he had more to say. "I keep thinking about you," he continued, "how you worked all those years, how you built that house while we were living above the laundromat. I never understood what that took, how much you sacrificed." "Danny, no, let me finish, please." He took a breath. "I was angry at you for so long. I blamed you for Mom leaving, even though that doesn't make sense. I blamed you for staying, for trying too hard, for making me feel guilty just by existing. But the truth is, I was angry at myself for not being enough to make Mom stay, for not appreciating what you did, for being the reason you gave up your dreams. You weren't the reason, you were the dream." His eyes filled with tears. "But I became your burden. I felt it every day, the weight of your expectations, your sacrifices, and instead of trying to meet them, I rebelled against them. I pushed you away because it was easier than trying to be worthy of everything you'd given up. You don't have to be worthy. You just have to be you." "But that's the thing, Dad. I didn't know who I was. I still don't, really. I'm figuring it out. But living on my own, struggling to pay bills, working a job that exhausts me, I'm starting to understand. Not everything, but enough. Enough for what? Enough to know I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not just for that night when I called you useless, but for all of it. For years of taking you for granted, for making you feel invisible in your own home, for not seeing that you were drowning and I was the weight dragging you down. You weren't dragging me down. The situation was, my own choices were our choices." He corrected. "It takes two people to break a relationship. I'm not going to let you take all the blame." We sat in silence, watching the clouds move across the lake. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," Danny said. "I know I have to earn that. But I want to try, if you'll let me. I told you before, I'm working on forgiving you. That hasn't changed. But Danny, you need to understand, things can't go back to the way they were. I know, and I don't want them to. The way things were wasn't good for either of us. So what do you want?" He thought for a long moment. "I want to get to know you, not as Dad, the person person who's obligated to take care of me, but as a person. What do you like? What do you think about? What are your dreams beyond just surviving and providing? No one had asked me those questions in decades. I realized I didn't even know the answers anymore. I'm still figuring that out myself. I admitted, maybe we can figure it out together. Not in the same house, not with the old dynamic, but as two people trying to build better versions of themselves. I looked at my son, no longer a boy, not quite a man, but something in between, and I saw, for the first time in years, genuine care in his eyes. I'd like that. I said, Danny and I began meeting once a week, sometimes at the cabin, sometimes at a diner halfway between us. We kept it simple. Coffee, conversation, no expectations. At first, it was awkward. We'd spent so many years not really talking that we'd forgotten how. We stuck to safe topics. His job, my woodworking projects, books we were reading, but gradually we went deeper. He told me about his struggles with depression, how losing his mother had left him feeling abandoned and worthless, how he'd channeled that pain into anger at the one person who had stayed. I told him about my own demons, the fear that I'd wasted my life, the resentment I'd carried, loneliness that had eaten at me even when I was surrounded by family. We talked about Sarah, not with bitterness, but with something closer to understanding. We acknowledged that she'd been suffering in ways neither of us had recognized, that leaving might have been her only form of survival. You still love her? Danny asked once. I love who she was, or who I thought she was, but that person is gone, if she ever really existed. Now I just feel sad for all of us. Do you think she ever thinks about me? I don't know, buddy. I hope so. But even if she doesn't, that's not a reflection on you. That's about her own damage, her own inability to be what you needed, like I was with you. No, you were a kid dealing with trauma. She was an adult making a choice. There's a difference. These conversations were healing for both of us. Slowly, we started to see each other as human, flawed, struggling, but trying. A year passed, then two. Danny worked his way up to line cook, then sous chef. He moved into a better apartment. He started dating someone. Seriously, a woman named Claire who worked at the local library. He invited me to meet her. We had dinner at his apartment, and I watched him move around his small kitchen with confidence, plating food he'd prepared himself. Claire was kind, intelligent, clearly smitten with my son. After she left, Danny and I cleaned up together. She seems wonderful. I said, she is. I'm trying not to screw it up. You won't. How do you know? Because you're aware of the possibility. That's half the battle. He smiled. When did you become wise? I'm not wise. I'm just tired enough to have perspective. As for me, I found my own rhythm. I took up wood carving, creating small sculptures that I sold at a local craft market. I joined a hiking group. I dated a woman named Margaret for a few months. It didn't work out, but it reminded me that I was still capable of connection. I learned to be alone without being lonely. I learned that solitude could be a gift rather than a punishment, and I learned that letting go didn't mean not loving. It meant loving enough to set free. 3 years after I sold the house, I drove past it on my way to visit Danny. The new owners had painted it blue. I'd kept it white. They'd added a swing set in the backyard and expanded the deck. There were different curtains in the windows, a different car in the driveway, a different life unfolding within those walls. I stopped the car and looked at it for a long moment. I felt nothing, no regret, no nostalgia, no pain. It was just a house now, a structure that held someone else's dreams. The house I'd built with my hands belonged to my past. The man I was building, patient, present, at peace, belonged to my future, and that felt right. Epilogue, the lesson: if I could go back and give advice to my younger self, the 20-something with sawdust under his nails and stars in his eyes, I'd say this: build the house, love your family, give your all, but also build yourself. Love yourself. Remember that you are more than what you provide. A house is just wood. Nails. A family is people who choose each other every day, and love without respect, without reciprocity, without room for both people to breathe. That's not love. It's suffocation dressed up as sacrifice. I learned that the hardest way possible, but I learned Danny calls me every Sunday now. Talk about real things, his fears, his hopes, his struggles, and I share mine. We're building something new, not on the foundation of obligation, but on the choice to keep showing up for each other. Last month, he told me Claire is pregnant. They're having a boy. I'm terrified. He admitted, what if I screw it up the way I screwed up with you? You didn't screw up. We both did, and we both healed. That's the lesson. Not perfection, but repair. Will you teach me how to be a father? I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to be the perfect father, the sacrificial father, the father who gave everything, and how that had nearly destroyed us both. I'll teach you what I've learned. I said, how to be present without suffocating, how to love without losing yourself, how to build a home that has room for everyone to grow, including you. That sounds perfect. It's not, but it's real, and that's better. He asked if I'd come to the hospital hospital when the baby arrives. I said yes. He asked if I'd help build a crib. I said yes. He asked if I'd forgive him for the lost years, and I said, there's nothing to forgive. We were both doing our best, and we found our way back. That's what matters, because in the end, that's the truth I've learned. You can build a house with perfect joints and level floors. You can plan every detail, measure twice, cut once, follow all the rules, but life doesn't work that way. People aren't structures. Relationships aren't blueprints. Sometimes you build something beautiful, and it falls apart anyway. Sometimes you lose everything you've constructed, and sometimes, standing in the rubble, you realize that what you built was never meant to last forever. It was meant to teach you how to build better next time, not better houses, but a better you. I sold the house I built. I walked away from the walls that held my history. I left my son standing on the lawn, confused and angry and scared, and in doing so, I found something I'd lost decades ago. Myself, not the father, not the builder, not the provider, just a man, imperfect. Healing, learning to live, and that man, the one I'm still becoming. He's not useless. He's free. This story is a testament to the silent struggles of those who give everything and the courage it takes to reclaim yourself when giving becomes self-destruction. To anyone who has ever felt invisible in their own life, you are not useless. You are not forgotten. You matter, and it's never too late to choose yourself.